It was always a high stakes business. It's always a critical business. It's even more so now. I would say it goes back all the way to your hiring policy. And then from a leadership point of view, it's diffusing all that noise. Stay focused, guys. Don't worry about, we've got a whole group of people over here who worry about price. You don't have to worry about price. You got a whole group of people over here who are worried about manufacturing. You don't have to worry about manufacturing. Let's just do what we do it really well, and keep our eyes focused on the prize. And let all that other stuff just happen around us.
Welcome, MedTech Gurus. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Joe Luminiello, founder and CEO of RCG Intel, a competitive intelligence firm operating at the intersection of healthcare, biopharma, and AI-driven decision-making. Joe brings more than 40 years of life sciences leadership experience. He was employee number 2, helping to launch Takeda Canada, driving more than $10 million in revenue in his first year. He has led a 650-person commercial organization responsible for over $1 billion in annual sales. He served as the CEO of an early-stage biotech company and overseen high-stakes M&A due diligence. Today, through RCG Intel, Joe works with executive teams to sharpen strategic decision-making by combining human intelligent networks with AI-powered analysis. His belief is simple but powerful. AI doesn't replace judgment, it sharpens it, but only when leaders know how to translate insights into execution. Joe will share what real-world commercial leadership looks like when growth, sales performance, and patient impact are on the line. Hey, Joe, are you ready to be our guru today?
Tom, that was a wonderful introduction. Thank you so much. In fact, I might steal it and use it in the future.
You're more than welcome to. So we're excited to have you, and tell us something fun or interesting about yourself or your family so we can get to know you a little better.
Well, I guess the most interesting thing that's going on for us now is last year my daughter had twins, and my other daughter-in-law is expecting soon. So we're in full spoil the kids mode. I never really understood it before, but I fully grasp it now. I really do. You know, you get to enjoy them and enjoy their personalities and everything, but then hand them back to mom when it's teething time and so forth. So I intellectually knew it, but I'm really embracing it now.
Yeah, I love that. It reminds me of that old joke that I heard about, why do grandparents and grandchildren get along so well? And the answer is because they have a common enemy.
That's kind of what it's coming down to.
I love it. So, Joe, as mentioned, you helped launch Takeda Canada as employee number 2, right? And then drove $10 million in revenue in your first year. What did that experience teach you about building an organization from zero?
Well, let me tease out some of the true but temporarily distorted data that you had in the intro. I started at Takeda here in the U.S. It was a joint venture between Abbott Labs before it broke up and Takeda of Japan, and it's probably one of the I'd have to say it's one of the top 5, maybe the top 1 hidden joint venture successes in the history of pharma. Mm-hmm. When I joined Takeda, it's called TAP, TAP. When I joined that relationship in the late 80s, I believe we lost $25 million that year. The company did. I was sales rep 54. And when I left 13 years later, we were grossing several $1 billion. And as you had mentioned, I had responsibility for $1 billion sales remit and some 600 managers and sales reps and so forth. During that time, I did go to Canada to help start the Takeda Canada company. Soon after I left TAP, I went to Takeda proper and then went up to Canada. Takeda had previously had a partnering strategy globally. So now the shift was, well, let's open up wholly owned subsidiaries. And let's start where it's easy and close in Canada. So we were going to take back from our partners like Abbott and others, products that were already on the shelf.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had to very quickly get up and running, because soon after we were accepting those products and had to accept all the responsibility for them: distribution, regulatory, adverse event reporting, and so forth. So we tried to have our cake and our needed too. Yes, some of the lessons. We tried to find seasoned professionals, because we were getting products day 3 or 4 or whatever it was. But we wanted an entrepreneurial spirit. If you have the opportunity to create something anew, would you want to create it in the old model or what you perceive to be the new model? We opted for Plan B, the new model, or what we thought was the new model. And we had a specific hiring profile to find tenured yet entrepreneurial people. And we failed. we found really good, experienced people. And in fact, the vice president of HR wanted to do a survey about, how did we do? And I said, well, why don't we just sit in a room and talk about it? There's only 10 of us. I mean, but she opted out of that and did do the survey. And I'm grateful that she did, because out of the 10 of us or so, turns out there was one entrepreneur, and that was me. So it created a little bit of a problem for us. So we just kind of, I guess, did the typical pharmaceutical blocking and tackling and went about our business. But it represented for me a real problem, because if I do have this entrepreneurial spirit, I have to go back to the US with I'll call it a mid-sized company. And furthermore, the parent company in Japan is almost 250 years old at that time. There's a lot of rules around that. And there's a lot of unspoken cultural rules, especially with ex-US companies. So I realized I had a problem. And in several years later, I had gone to BD when I came back. And several years later, when I left the company, I tried this entrepreneurial spirit. And that is a tough road.
Yeah. And it's interesting because a lot of folks get used to having that infrastructure around them. And when you're a 10-employee organization, right, you've got to, make things up on the fly and find resources where oftentimes there are none. Is that what you found?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And that was the problem with the disconnect between entrepreneurial spirit and tenured people. There was a person in marketing who asked about the marketing plan. We had basically just found an office and leased it. We were, it was a moral victory to figure out how the copier worked back when there were copiers.
Yeah, right.
So when she asked me about that, I said, well, that's why we hired you. That's why I need you. I don't have a marketing plan, and I won't say she was shocked, but I'll say it was a little bit of a culture shock for her to hear that I wasn't handing her something to go execute, right? Like I needed roll up your sleeves, get things done kind of people, from, again, literally, how does this copier work, to literally, what's the access like in Ontario versus British Columbia for our products, all at the same time.
Yeah.
And that was very difficult. It's difficult for them, and I have empathy for them, those folks, but it's also a difficult leadership challenge, right? Like how do you now manage that?
Yeah. And then on the other side of the equation too, you mentioned that you had been responsible for 650 individuals in a commercial organization that was responsible for like $1 billion in sales. So compare and contrast that a little bit for us. What does it take at that end of it to scale leadership and grow?
That's a really great question. So I got promoted within the same ranks. So my subordinates were last week my peers. We had a good relationship and we could talk freely with each other. So one of the first things we decided, that every level of leadership was responsible for their next level down and then one. Right. So for me, It was leading and helping and dealing and getting bureaucracy out of the way of my regional managers and having a relationship and a leadership presence with their district managers, right? For my regional managers, it meant the district managers and the reps. You'd think that's where it would stop, and I give my peer group great credit because they went even further and said, well, if that's the case, we should make the district managers responsible for their sales reps, but also for their biggest or key accounts. They need to have a relationship with those people, those doctors that were prescribing. So it was kind of a tailored or thoughtful. I hate to say trickle down as if it's economics, but it's not. But we really wanted it to cascade down in terms of our commitment to and our working with the first level to a high degree and the second level to a lesser degree because time just won't permit. And I think it really worked well.
Yeah.
And it got, prior to that, I was a regional manager. First of all, for me, it's kind of like a two-sided board game or like how do I manage up and get things off their backs that don't need to be there, but also how do we get things that we truly need from the corporation? And then on the other side was, well, how do I get them to perform better? How do we get ourselves to perform better? What are the things we need to do? And I'd like to say you spend a lot of time doing that, but with this was 600 with the management included. If I've got 10% turnover, which was common back then, that's 60 people coming or going all the time. Yeah. That's a lot of HR, right? So one of my goals was, how can I cut that down or at least get out of that? So again, this involvement with people would want to push off to another level a certain responsibility for human resources. And my answer often was, well, I don't know. What's your decision? I don't know that rep. Like, you know that rep. How can I get involved with that, right? But HR wanted me to get involved because then there's cover.
Right. Yeah,
right?
Exactly. So, Joe, I'd like to pivot a little bit in terms of some of the product development and some of the other experiences that you've had. We know that many good products fail not because the science is weak, but often because commercial execution is misaligned. From your experience, where do you most often see clinical development and commercial strategy disconnects? Can you give us some insights there?
Ooh, I can try. I helped try to start a cardiovascular, I won't say division, but a silo at Takeda. They had some products they had been developing for different parts of the cardiovascular space, and we knew nothing about it. So we created, first of all, a strategy, because if you say cardiovascular, does that mean chronic heart failure, or does that mean atherosclerosis, or what does that mean? And what do we want to be involved in, and why do we want to be involved in? The other thing is, a lot of times, the siloization, if you will, of a company causes people not to talk to each other, right? So all too often, you come late to the game and realize a lot of decisions have already been made that are baked into the product profile, and therefore probably the package insert that commercials scratching their head about. Like, It's great science. I'm glad we did it, but how does that help us launch the product? So there's a lot of times a disconnect that I think a good cross-functional process can ameliorate.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to be willing to go back far enough in development to get commercial input. I often wonder, Tom, about publicly traded smaller companies, startups, well-funded, but, is the failure really a failure, or is it a matter of, the executive team who had to raise capital telling the market how great this is, and then 18 months out, you're either at the end of phase 3 or you're submitting to the government, and you hand it to the commercial team, and they're like, wow, that's not even close what we would think, right? So
Mhm.
I think failure may have a lot to do with expectations and how those expectations were optically delivered over time versus a flat out plain failure. Now, both are possible, right? You could have overpromised and poorly executed. You, you, there's a lot of things that could happen, but I do think it's always odd to me. You and I are on a platform I've never been on. There's Zoom, there's Teams, I have 2 different kinds of messaging apps on my phone. We can pick up the phone and call each other, and yet a big problem to commercial launch is lack of communication.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And that's where those silos come from, right? Often is not understanding. And do you find that many times, you talked about the CEOs out raising money, that there's not been enough clinical involvement, sharing data with the providers or the individuals that are going to be using the product?
I think it depends on when,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like if you've got an orphan drug with a priority review, and you're just starting out in phase 3, 2B or 3, and you think that runway is really pretty short, you've got to invest the time to get out there. And again, it depends on the market. If it's something where there's no real good answer right now, and you've got to develop the space and develop the thinking of the doctors around a new mechanism or a new way to do that, that takes time.
Mm-hmm.
Even the standard for us, we launched 4 drugs in a year one time, and the standard for us was like, you need an 18-month runway in a well-established marketplace where doctors know what the symptoms look like, where doctors know what traditional treatment looks like, and they know what the gold standard is. So when you show them data versus a gold standard, they can calculate in their heads what this really means. And so that's 18 months in a well-established segment or disease state. You can imagine if you've got a brand new way to go about trying to help these patients that needs to have the science backing, right? That you need. One of the things that I assume we're going to talk about AI in a little bit, or intelligence, but as I was going through this process for our own consulting company, I dove deeper and deeper and deeper into AI and in the space. And I'm by no means an expert, but I know enough to be dangerous. And, one of the things companies can lose when they have these medical liaisons and they say to themselves, gee, they're really expensive. If we just had a system where doctors could ask questions to our proprietary AI system, they can get really qualified answers and everything will be fine. And if that's your goal, if your goal is simply to provide doctors technical answers to technical questions, yeah, I would agree. But if you do that, you'll lose the people to people interaction that you need to launch a drug properly, right? And also the competitive intelligence your company gains by listening to those doctors and those nurses and those physicians' assistants and getting really good information that you won't otherwise get from a data set.
Yeah.
So you kind of go to AI at your own peril if you don't really think it through in depth.
Yeah, let's drill into that for a second, right? Because if I've got this right, through RCG Intel, you do focus on this competitive intelligence. So help us out. Take this to another level. What is really the difference between collecting that data and building true strategic intelligence? Can you bring us some insights there?
Well, yeah, for us, it starts at the ground level, right? There's data, as you know, right, and spring is coming upon us, and it's scientific congress season, and everybody's going to have new data, and you can crunch that data. You can do all kinds of things with that data. There's other kinds of data out there in the world, signal data, press releases, SEC, podcasts, patient networks that are complaining about some side effect of some drug or something. And then there's human intelligence, right? And for time immemorial, since there's been intelligence gathering agencies and primarily governments and military, it's the human intelligence that really helps you put everything else you have into context.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you go to a Congress and the press release says, this is probably the greatest drug that was ever created by humans. And when you're there and you can see the doctors walking out of the plenary session chuckling to themselves because that data is not believable, then you know something that just pure data won't tell you, right? Or when you talk to the KOLs or when you talk to nurses. So it's this contextualizing that we specialize in, which then goes into a company's strategic thinking, right?
Gotcha.
I think many companies do just take the data and they're happy with it. I guess because the rounding error is so wide in their minds, they're thinking, yeah, if we're wrong by 5%, whatever, That's until, to your point earlier, you launch it and you realize, oh, that really was significant.
Yeah.
Right? Then you get the aha moment. But providing contextual intelligence is what we do and what companies can use to better make strategic decisions. In particular, I can remember we just simply called it a plus minus, right? Here's your forecast. And here's my pluses. Well, if that happens, we'll make that much more. And if that happens, if we get access in Medicare or whatever the circumstance is, and then the negative list. Well, what if you don't get it? And what if you don't get that plus two others? Or what if the data says you're not safe or you're just equally as safe? So when you think about that plus minus list, sometimes out of 5 of them, let's just say 5 assumptions, 3 of them are the key drivers. The other 2 are just kind of nice to have. And in those cases, for those assumptions, I think the contextual intelligence is critical. You have to really believe those 3 assumptions to believe your forecast. And if you don't, that shouldn't be your forecast. Right?
Yeah, gotcha. And you touched on AI a little bit ago, so I wanted to dig into that a little deeper, right? Because it's clear AI is reshaping how companies gather and analyze market insights out there, as you kind of explained. So if you're a biotech or medtech leader out there, what should you be thinking about, with using AI without using that human judgment or that human touch that you're talking about? How do we execute on that?
Yeah. So because I dove so deep, I actually kind of I didn't kind of write a book. I did write a book about it. And I talk about our own experience at RCG, right? We started in 2023 in the fall. And one of the first things we had to tackle was not only how are we going to operate and what are we all about, but a key strategic decision was our positioning, especially because of AI, right? Our clients were building AI capabilities. Our competitors were building AI capabilities. And then there's the whole issue of Elon Musk and Anthropic and everybody else, right? Building way sophisticated AI. And it was something we had to grapple with. And I give the team credit because I kept pushing. I wouldn't let it go. I just needed to have the answer. And it took a long time. But in the end, we realized that there's just no way. There's no way we can keep up, right? I'm not going to beat Grok, right? So, and I'm not going to beat Pfizer, and I'm not going to beat anybody else, even some of our competitors who had a 3-year head start in building their AI. Well, I don't know how they're going to keep up because next week they could be, yesterday's news. So we believed deeply and still do in this human intelligence thing, providing context to the data and more actionable information to our clients. And that's our positioning. That's, we'll use AI. The data vendors have their own AI, right? We'll use that. We'll create AI for internal systems to help us do better BD or do internal processes different. And I don't think it's any different for startups or particularly startups. I think companies that are large and have their silos, as you know, it's hard to pivot. You're more like an aircraft carrier trying to pivot rather than a little PT boat, if they still exist, PT boats. So I think it requires a thoughtful, proactive, strategic discussion with the executive team, driven by the CEO or president or whatever you have, to say, look, we've got to deal with this, right? Like, I think it's a big mistake for a company to say, making it up, right? Oh, Amazon just laid off thousands. I'm in a similar business to them. If I want to make my next quarter's number relative to Amazon, I've got to lay off my people too. That's just a bad way to do business, right? So be thoughtful, be strategic, and really think it through. Again, going back to the same example, you could figure out a way to get, to reduce your medical liaisons, but at what cost? Mm-hmm. And like a lot of people tell me, well, I just need the senior managers because I need them to check the work of AI. But if you let go of all your junior people and that's all you have, in time, you won't have senior people anymore. They'll be gone.
Yeah.
Right? You'll ask them to leave, they'll retire, and you're going to end up with folks who don't know how to exercise good human judgment with the data that AI is creating. Now, interestingly, I just posted it a day or two ago. I don't know how to say his name, the CEO of NVIDIA, Jensen Huang.
Jensen Huang, yeah. Jensen Huang.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He said, it was funny because I felt like he was in our meetings with the team. He said, if I can hire an employee for $100,000 and implement an AI system for $10,000, but I make the output of that union 2, 3, 4 times better, I'll do that every day.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that's the way to think about it. And that's the way we thought about it.
Yeah. So with that, right, you mentioned small businesses and small teams. Many small teams are working on high-stake programs out there, right? Especially in oncology or rare disease, and they're facing a lot of pressure. So what have you learned about motivating teams when outcomes matter deeply like this? Can you provide us some insights?
Well, it goes back to your hiring strategy, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you have a profile, and as I mentioned from my Canadian experience, we had a profile, we just weren't successful. So the profile doesn't get you all the way there. But if you have a hiring profile that will be amenable to that high stakes, high reward for your patients, and also therefore for your stakeholders and yourself, then it'll be okay. I'd always, a couple quick things. I will always try to hire people who are smarter than me. Mm-hmm. I'm smart enough to know. I'm not smart enough to know. Yeah. Right? The other thing is I want racehorses because I can pull back the reins on a racehorse, but I can't really get a nag to run. And then I just want to, I hate to use the horse metaphor again, but I just want to provide the guide rails. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, what's my left and right limits? And if you're going too fast, if something's not happening, I'll pull back and I'll let you know, hey, just chill out for another 6 months because regulatory isn't ready or development hasn't got it figured out. Now, it sounds a little scary because these companies are in highly regulated markets, right? Mm-hmm. But it's really not, because I don't know what the stats are, but it's really, really infrequent that a really good employee with good intentions, who's a high flyer and ready to go, makes a tragic mistake from a regulatory point of view. There's just too many systems and SOPs and stuff around them, right? It can happen, of course, but it's really not common, I don't think, in my experience anyway. Mm-hmm. Sure, it can happen, but not that often. So in this high stakes environment, now it's changing, right? The other thing that AI has caused, well, let me think about it a different way. The current geopolitical situation is crazy. Like, it's very dynamic. I remember when the current administration was elected, I was asking some clients, I said, well, aren't you concerned about this tariff thing? Like, what if you have to move your manufacturing? And they're like, well, that's going to take years, Joe. You got to get the thing built or, leased. You got to get it approved, FDA. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't think he plays by the same rules that everybody else is playing by. Most favored nation pricing. Oh, that'll take years, Joe. Don't worry about it. Okay, but I'm telling you, it's gonna, so not only is it happening, it's happening so fast. It's so quick. Things are happening every week, it seems like. Then you add on top of that the advent of AI, and that's happening at a crazy, vertical pace. So it was always a high stakes business. It's always a critical business. It's even more so now, right? So I would say it goes back all the way to your hiring policy. And then from a leadership point of view, it's diffusing all that noise, right? Stay focused, guys. Don't worry about, we've got a whole group of people over here who worry about price. You don't have to worry about price. We got a whole group of people over here who are worried about manufacturing. You don't have to worry about manufacturing. Let's just do what we do it really well, and keep our eyes focused on the prize and let all that other stuff just happen around us.
Yeah, stay in your lane, so to speak. So, Joe, many MedTech companies struggle with sales execution after product launch. So what are the most common commercial mistakes you see, and how can leaders correct them early so they don't stagnate the organization?
Admitting bias, Tom. It's interesting. When I was in sales, people used to tell me, you should be in marketing. You don't think like a salesperson. And when I was in marketing, people would be like, you should go back to sales because you don't really think like a marketing. I think that's the problem. I think that there's a disconnect. We once launched a product and marketing was telling us that, after 15 years of using the competitor product, the doctors were unsure about safety. I was like, that's not even close to that cannot even be close to reality, right? Like that's not even possible unless you have an incompetent doctor.
Right.
So I think there's a disconnect between, and this goes back to contextualizing and using human intelligence to bolster the data, right? I'm sure they were using data. They weren't making it up, but were they using had they gone out and really talked to doctors? Had they really just gone on sales calls with sales reps and listened to the doctors? So I think it's a disconnect there. Then, of course, it comes down to all the traditional levers with salespeople. How do you compensate them? What's their bonus program? How do you show them? How does the organization show the sales reps that they're valued? What's the ego part of that? So how do you talk to them? It's everything. But I think the main disconnect, for lack of a better phrase, is again, making sure that marketing and sales kind of got it figured out. Because sometimes, as you know, what we think is the strategy really wasn't the strategy.
And how do you go about doing that, making sure marketing sales do have it figured out? Is that just pure communication, getting them all in the same room?
Right. So it's crazy, this leadership concept, right? I know of a case, well, you'd think, for example, some places have the chief commercial officer where it all comes together, right? Or the VP of sales and marketing, and it all comes together. And that's possible, right? That's certainly one way to address it, and probably the best structural way to address it. I know of a case where the VP of sales and the VP of twice actually, the VP of sales and the VP of marketing didn't kind of get along. In fact, they had office in the one case. They had offices at the opposite ends of the building. So someone had the right idea. Well, let's put them together. Let's have them hang out together. They'll talk. They'll meet at the coffee thing, And so when they moved their offices, they would come out of their offices and go their separate ways. Right. So it's a leadership function. Someone at some point in the chain has to step up and say, this is dysfunctional. We need to do a better job of talking to each other. Right. It can be a structural thing, like, again, joining those two functions underneath one leader. That needs to be a gifted leader. And it's hard to do two things at once. It's certainly possible. Don't get me wrong, but I think it's a culture thing, a leadership thing, a president and CEO thing, or a chief commercial officer thing, getting sales and marketing to talk.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't stop there, right? Like, what about the development guys and gals?
Mm-hmm.
Are they talking to sales? Does sales and marketing know what they're developing? And I mean, I know in the big sense, we got this product or we got this device, but in a really minutiae sense, how does it work? How will they get it? Does it cause the nurses in the hospital to change their routine? They're not going to want to do that.
Yeah, right.
We're going to have to force them to do it. Now, maybe that device or that thing has to be done that way, in which case we on the sales and marketing side need to set the environment where they're willing to do that. But if you don't tell us until the last minute, it's going to be hard for us to set the stage for change in behavior beyond just using the device or prescribing that drug. If it's a change in my routine as a nurse, that's going to be hard.
Yeah.
But development never talked to marketing, who never talked to sales, and
Yeah. Gotcha. So, Joe, if you were advising a MedTech CEO today, that's somebody preparing for rapid growth over, let's say, the next 3 years, what would you tell them should be their top strategic priority?
Tom, just a qualification: do they already have their device or their drug or whatever? Or
yeah, they're ready to go. If they're ready for commercialization.
Yeah, this is a tough one because I'm not really sure what's going to happen to the capital markets.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anybody is, but there's a lot of noise from PE and other places where things are not so great. And yet you don't want to build yesterday's company. If the rate of change is vertical, you don't want to build a company that was great, 2 months ago. I jokingly said to someone recently that in a strategic discussion, the person was talking like they were old school. And I said, like 2024. Right. So like it's changing so fast. So I would suggest that they really sit down with their team and try to think about what's it really going to be like when we launch in whatever year that is, and the next 2 years after that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're launching in 2026, it's a little easier to get your head around, but it's going to be really hard to be prescient about what's going to happen in the future when the future is happening so fast.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's going to be a real challenge. You don't want to increase the size of your company just to downsize it later. And when I say later, I mean almost immediately because of AI, right? There was just an advertisement before we got on, Tom, about some platform that purports to be able to make diagnosis, right? So what's going on with my doctors? What's going on with the nurses? What are we going to do? It's really tough. I don't envy them.
Yeah.
It's really, on the other side of this coin, though, I do think there'll be a merging quicker than otherwise would have happened because of AI of therapeutics and devices.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I think there's a real opportunity there. Elon Musk is an example with his Neuralink, thing. He's not using a drug, but this whole technology thing, I think, has a lot of opportunity for entrepreneurs and people in startups to think about. And you bring diagnostics in too, if you can bring it all under one umbrella. But now that's 3 different silos moving really fast, which is really hard to manage.
Yeah. It's daunting, that's for sure. So, Joe, this seems like a real exciting time for RCG Intel. Well, what does the future hold? Where are you going from here?
That's a great question. I was thinking about it just this morning. I really feel we're well positioned because of the decisions we made back in 2023. And I really feel that human to human interactions and jobs and careers that depend on that will have greater longevity and greater, perhaps maybe even more important, greater import. And therefore the economics will be better, right? So maybe I'm being too optimistic, but I'm thinking now, okay, so if this continues the way it's going, that's great. What do I need to acquire?
Mm-hmm.
When I say I mean RCG, what do we need to acquire? What's the best logical thing for us to do? Right now, I just need to execute against this year, and we all do at the team. But my head's starting to think this is a really good positioning, and therefore it'll be generating enough cash flow for us to be thinking about what to do next.
Yeah.
In the same space, right? I don't want to blow out of the niche. I love the niche.
Yeah. Got it. Sounds like an exciting time. So, Joe, first of all, I'd like to thank you and acknowledge you for being our guru today and the insights that you brought. If somebody wants to learn more, how do we do that? Is there a website? Are you on LinkedIn? How do we find out more about what you and your team are up to?
RCGintel.com.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty complicated. I made it simple so I could remember it.
There you go.
And of course, my LinkedIn, Joe Luminiello. The company has a LinkedIn as well, RCG Intel. And that's essentially the core ways. From the website, you can obviously just do an info thing and I'll call you or whatever, however you want to do it.
Gotcha. Perfect. So, Joe, once again, thank you so much for being our guru today. It was a pleasure to speak with you and learn about what you and your team are up to.
Tom, it was really great talking with you. It was a fun interview, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to MedTech Gurus. I am Sylvester Harris, your MC. If you want to learn more about Tom and his consulting services, you can go to www.pctmedical.com or email Tom at tom@pctmedical.com. Now, I can be reached at Sylvester Harris, that's SylvesterHarris 5048 @gmail.com. And I'd be pleased to discuss any voiceover work that you may want for your company or broadcast. Hey, thanks so much for listening and catch us on the next episode of MedTech Gurus.